the glass shattered before I even touched it. That old whiskey bottle, I kept it sealed for 50 years, had been sitting on the shelf above the fireplace. When I slammed the photo frame down, the vibrations must have knocked it loose. Fitting. 50 years of memories broken in a heartbeat. "Sit down," I said, not yelling. Just, precise. Margaret stood frozen, her robe half open, the color drained from her face. She was holding the little velvet box I gave her on our anniversary, tonight, our 50th. She looked like a stranger holding something sacred she didn't deserve. "David, what is?" "Don't." I raised a finger. "Calm. Measured." My voice was lower than usual. That voice I used back when I had to speak to soldiers who saw their best friends die. I dropped the USB drive onto the coffee table. It clattered like a bullet casing. She didn't move. "Play it." She stood there for a long moment. Then, with trembling fingers, she bent down, plugged it into the TV. There was static. Then the grainy black and white footage began. Hotel room. Blurry timestamp in the corner. Sound off, but I didn't need audio. It was her. Margaret. In that red blouse she wore last week when she told me she was going to see her sister. She wasn't with her sister. He entered the frame. I didn't blink. It was Harold Simmons. The man I dragged out of a jungle in '71. He was 19. Shot in the leg, bleeding out. I carried him for 3 miles under gunfire. Gave him my canteen. Took a bullet through the shoulder for him. He swore he owed me his life. Apparently, he decided to pay me back by screwing my wife 5 decades later. The video wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. The touches. The kisses. The way she looked at him. That was enough. Margaret dropped the remote like it burned her. I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. Her mouth moved, but I heard nothing. My own heartbeat was louder. Slow. Steady. Like a war drum. She stepped toward me, reaching out. I stepped back. "You waited 50 years to show me who you really are," I said. "That takes commitment." Tears welled up in her eyes. "It was a mistake. It's just been, lately, I feel like we're just roommates. You barely talk to me anymore." I nodded slowly. Then turned and walked toward the study. Behind me, I heard her sobbing. I didn't care. In the study, I opened the drawer where I kept the folder. I'd started compiling it months ago: suspicions, receipts, strange credit card charges, screenshots of texts I wasn't supposed to see. I wasn't sure why I'd started collecting all that. Maybe deep down, I already knew. I sat down and began reviewing everything again, this time not with doubt or pain, but with cold precision. 50 years. I remembered the wedding. The cake. The smell of her hair. The way she laughed when the priest forgot my name during the vows. I remembered our first home. The night she gave birth. The way she held our daughter and smiled like the world made sense. I remembered her comforting me when my brother died. I remembered holding her during her mother's funeral. I remembered every moment when I thought we were one soul split between 2 bodies. And now I remembered the sound of that hotel door clicking shut behind them. There's something dangerous about a man who's given everything, and realizes he has nothing left to lose. Tomorrow, I wouldn't go to the office. Tomorrow, I would begin my plan. It wouldn't be messy. It wouldn't be violent. It would be surgical. Because I've spent a lifetime keeping promises. But now, I was going to break one. The one I made to her on our wedding day. Margaret didn't come to bed that night. I heard her crying downstairs, pacing, calling her sister, probably rehearsing a lie, or maybe just drowning in the truth. I didn't go down. I sat in the dark, in the old leather chair by the window, staring out into the backyard we built together in 1978. We planted that maple tree ourselves. Dug the hole, set the roots. Watched it grow with our daughter. Watched it turn red every fall. I used to think it meant something. Now, it looked like a grave marker. At 5:47 a.m., I went downstairs. She was asleep on the couch, puffy eyes, tissues everywhere. I walked past her like she wasn't there. She flinched at the sound of my boots on the hardwood. I didn't stop. I drove to the diner on Main Street. Same booth I've been sitting in for 32 years. Mabel, the waitress, poured me coffee before I even sat down. "Rough night?" she asked. I gave her a nod. Nothing more. By 6:30, I was on the phone with a private investigator. Not just some punk with a camera. I called Donnie Morales. Retired FBI. Used to work counterintelligence before he quit and went freelance. He owed me a favor. I cashed it in. "Send me everything you can find on Harold Simmons," I said. And I mean everything. Business ties, bank accounts, marriage records, tax files. Dig like you're looking for buried treasure. There was a pause. "You thinking legal route or something darker?" "I'm thinking surgical." He didn't ask any more questions. By noon, I had a full report in my inbox. Harold Simmons wasn't just successful. He was slippery. Offshore accounts. Real estate in 3 states. A wife half his age. Private jet he didn't report on taxes. A construction company that didn't actually build anything. It was all there. The man I saved in 1971 had turned into a parasite with a Rolex. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the lawyer's office. Quiet guy. Real shark. Helped me redraw my will. Remove Margaret from all property. Secure my assets under a trust she couldn't touch. When I got home, she was waiting at the kitchen table. "You haven't said anything," she said. I sat across from her. Looked her in the eye. "Because I'm not done thinking." She opened her mouth to say something, but closed it again. "Good. I want to know one thing," I said. "Was it just him?" Her eyes widened. "No. Never. Just Harold." I swear. I believed her. But it didn't matter. "It started when?" She hesitated. 2 years ago." I nodded. Took a sip of water. "You were seeing him while I was in the hospital." Her mouth fell open. No. "David, I didn't mean. You had sex with him the same week they put a pacemaker in my chest." Silence. Her eyes flooded again. "I thought you were going to die," she whispered. I panicked. I didn't know who I was without you. That line might have worked 30 years ago. Not now. "You're gonna tell me every detail," I said. "Every time. Every place. How long it lasted. What you wore. I want all of it." She looked horrified. "Why would you want to torture yourself like that?" "Torture?" I leaned forward. "You think this is about pain?" "I'm gathering intelligence." She went pale. And she talked. God help her, she talked. By the time she was done, I knew more about her affair than she probably remembered. She told me about the cabin in Vermont. The fake girls' weekends. The time he picked her up from my office parking lot. My own office. I was 3 floors above them, reviewing company health benefits. When she finished, she tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to hit you. I'm not going to cry, I said. But I am going to bury you. That was the last thing I said before walking out. I spent the next 4 hours in my workshop. Not the garage, not the shed. The workshop. The place where I built our daughter's crib. Where I carved Margaret's name into a wooden box for our 20th anniversary. Where I fixed every broken chair, every table leg, every loose hinge for 50 years. I sat at the bench and started drawing. Not furniture. Blueprints. I drew out the timeline. Cross-referenced receipts, locations, GPS data. I set up a strategy, legal, financial, personal. I knew where Harold's weak points were. I knew where his cash flowed, who he paid off, who he slept with besides my wife. I would expose it all. Not like a man screaming in the street. Like a ghost that tears your life apart before you know he's there. By the time I came back in the house, it was dark. Margaret was asleep in the bed. My bed. I didn't wake her. I just stood there, watching her for a while. The lines on her face. The soft rise and fall of her breath. I used to love that face. Now it was the mask of a stranger. I left her sleeping. And I locked the door behind me. I spent the next morning at the bank. Not my usual branch, the downtown office, where they didn't know me by name. I wore a pressed shirt, clean shave, leather gloves. Every move calculated. I wasn't just closing accounts or shifting funds. I was repositioning the battlefield. I converted liquid assets, shifted retirement accounts, and froze a joint savings account Margaret didn't know I had access to. She wouldn't know yet. Not today. I wanted her to feel safe for just a little longer. Let her think the storm had passed. Let her believe that maybe I was calming down. Then I'd drown her entire world. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in my car outside the Simmons Group main office. Harold's Empire. A 4-story glass building pretending to be more legitimate than it was. People in business suits walked in and out, pretending they weren't working for a crook. I wasn't there for a confrontation. Not yet. I was there for a face. It took 20 minutes for her to arrive. Blonde, tall, younger than Margaret by a couple decades. Her dress cost more than my car. She stepped out of a black Tesla and walked through the main doors like she owned them. Wife number 2. Harold's trophy. Her name was Celeste. I knew all about her. She used to model. Married him 6 years ago. No prenup. No kids. But she had something better, leverage. Harold had signed over a portion of his real estate assets to her name. It made her dangerous. It also made her useful. At 11:12, I walked into the building. The receptionist was some kid with fake eyelashes and a headset. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "But I do have a box that belongs to Mrs. Simmons." I lifted the polished black case from under my coat. Locked. Professional. Mysterious. The kind of thing that gets attention. 2 minutes later, Celeste came down herself. She looked me over. Suspicious. Cautious. But curious enough to take the bait. "I'm Celeste Simmons." I nodded. "David Clark. I served with your husband in Vietnam." We were close. Her expression changed. Just slightly. "I have something you'll want to see," I said. She led me into a small private conference room. Closed the door. I placed the box on the table. Let it sit there. Unopened. "You should know," I said, "your husband and my wife have been having an affair for over 2 years." She blinked. "That's not possible." It's not only possible, I said. It's recorded. She stared at the box like it might explode. What is this? Evidence. Video. Receipts. Hotel records. Emails. She didn't reach for it. I slid a business card across the table. Take the box. Watch it. If you want to talk afterward, call that number. It's a burner phone. No one can trace it. I stood up. And don't worry, I added, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. But if you decide you want to help me ruin him, I'll have a plan. I walked out before she could respond. By 3 p.m., the call came. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't deny. She just said, tell me what to do. It was too early to make a full move. I needed more. So I planted seeds. That night, Margaret tried to make dinner. Roast beef. Mashed potatoes. My favorite. She even lit candles. I sat across from her. Ate slowly. Quietly. Like a man waiting on a verdict. You scaring me, she finally said. You should be scared. Her lip trembled. I kept eating. I want to fix this, she said. We can go to counseling, we can. No, I said. You can't fix a collapsed bridge with duct tape. She tried to speak again. I raised a hand. Margaret, do you have any idea what you've done? She swallowed hard. I betrayed you. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed a man who saved a life, who buried friends, who built a world for you. And you traded all of it for what, some faded charm and a sports car? She couldn't answer. I hope he was worth it, I said. Because you just declared war. I stood and left her sitting there in the candlelight, the smell of food going cold between us. Later that night, I opened an old fireproof safe I hadn't touched in years. Inside was everything Harold had sent me over the years, letters, photographs, even a purple heart he mailed back to me in gratitude. I scanned it all. Every scrap. I would use it. Harold loved being a hero. Loved telling people how a Inam buddy saved his life. He built part of his career on that story. Too bad I still had the truth. Tomorrow, I'd reach out to the journalists. And the first domino would fall. The reporter's name was Alan Price. I met him once, back in 2003, when he wrote a piece about veterans getting screwed by the VA. Sharp guy. Honest. The kind who didn't care about sponsors or pressure from upstairs. He just wanted the truth, especially if it pissed someone off. I left a burner message, I've got a story. Military valor, corporate fraud, marital betrayal. You'll want it. He called me back within the hour. We met in the parking lot of a closed hardware store on the edge of town. I handed him a manila envelope, no words, no greetings, just facts. Inside, a letter Harold wrote me in 1972, detailing how we faked some battlefield numbers to save a dying soldier from being court-martialed. That letter had stayed buried for 50 years. Where'd you get this? Alan asked. I am the soldier. He looked at me. Measured. Serious. He knew this wasn't just revenge. This could blow up careers, he said. I shrugged. Only if it's true. And the other stuff? The company, the affairs, the money laundering? There's more coming. You'll have it. He nodded once. I'll run it. But only if it checks out. It will. We shook hands. Deal made. That night, I received a text from Celeste. He's at the cabin. Alone. Vermont. I had known about the cabin. Margaret mentioned it once, a book club retreat. At the time, I thought she was just trying to spice up retirement. Now I knew what kind of books they were reading. The drive to Vermont was 6 hours. I didn't pack a bag. Just a duffel with copies of documents, a pair of gloves, and one of Margaret's red scarves. I got there after midnight. The cabin sat in the woods, old and overpriced, a monument to their lies. Lights were on. His car out front. I parked in the trees and approached on foot. Quiet. Like I was back in the jungle, flanking a target. Through the window, I saw him sitting in a chair, drinking scotch, watching sports. Relaxed. Oblivious. I walked up the steps and knocked. He answered the door in a t-shirt and boxers. It took him a moment to recognize me. Then, David? He looked like he'd seen a ghost. You didn't expect me, did you? He stared. What are you doing here? I held up the scarf. You left this in my bedroom. Thought you might want it back. His face turned white. Look, I didn't mean for any of this. You never do, I said. You didn't mean to lie. You didn't mean to cheat. You didn't mean to climb your way up using my name. But here we are. He stepped back, but didn't close the door. Foolish. You're angry. I get it. But don't do anything stupid. I'm not here to fight, I said. I'm here to talk. He hesitated. Then let me in. The inside of the cabin reeked of cologne, scotch, and betrayal. On the coffee table was a framed photo of Margaret. Her smile looked foreign now, like it belonged to someone I'd never met. You kept a photo of my wife, I said. He didn't respond. I dropped the duffel bag on the table and unzipped it. Pulled out the documents. Copies of bank transfers. Internal memos. A lease agreement for a property bought with offshore money. And a file with screenshots of explicit messages between him and Margaret. He didn't touch them. Just stared. What is this? Your funeral, I said. You bluffing. I shook my head. No. I'm setting the table. He sat down. Wiped his face. I'll give you money, he said. You want silence? Fine. I can pay. I laughed. You think this is about money? He didn't understand. Tomorrow morning, I continued, the story hits the press. Alan Price is running it. Your war story? It's done. The company? Under review. Celeste? She's already seen the videos. He froze. I leaned forward. I'm not taking you to court. I'm not putting you in jail. That would give you a chance to fight back. I want you to drown under your own weight. You're ruining my life, he whispered. No, I said. You ruined mine. I'm just making it even. He didn't speak after that. Just sat there, staring at the files like they were bombs. I left him that way. Back in the car, I texted Celeste, delivered. Your move. She responded with one word, I understood. At home, Margaret was waiting. Awake. Sitting at the kitchen table in her robe again. Her eyes red. Where were you? I didn't answer. She reached out. Please. Just talk to me. I looked at her hand. Those fingers that had held me for decades now felt like the hands of a stranger. You want to talk? I said. Let's talk. I sat down and told her everything. Every document. Every photo. Every file I'd given to the press. Every meeting with Celeste. Every ounce of the noose I was tying around Harold's neck. She cried through all of it. When I finished, I stood. This isn't revenge, I said. It's justice. I walked upstairs and locked the bedroom door behind me. The story broke at 8:03 a.m. Front page of the local online paper. Alan didn't hold back. The headline was brutal: a decorated war hero or corporate criminal? The truth about Harold Simmons. Beneath it, the opening paragraph detailed our past, the rescue, the bloodshed, the bond, then pivoted to the financial fraud, falsified records, and hypocrisy behind the hero facade. I watched the view counter climb. 500. 2,000. 10,000 by lunch. Comments flooded in. Some shocked, some furious. Veterans groups demanded clarification. Former employees started contacting the paper with their own stories. Lawsuits began to stir. Celeste played her part flawlessly. She released a public statement within hours. I am deeply disturbed by the revelations about my husband. I am cooperating fully with authorities. No mention of the affair, of course. Just corporate fraud, tax evasion, and ethical violations. But the damage was done. By 2 p.m., Harold's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. At 3:47, I got a call from a blocked number. David, came the voice. Cracked. Broken. What do you want? Nothing, I said. I already have it. You destroyed me. You did that all on your own. Click. I turned off the phone and threw the SIM card into the fireplace. Later that evening, I drove to the local VFW. Same building I'd walked into for decades. Same men sitting at the same bar stools. But this time, when I walked in, the room fell silent. Then someone stood up. An old Marine named Hank. He raised a glass. To David Clark. For keeping us honest. A few seconds passed. Then others raised their drinks. One by one. Silent, but unified. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just took the glass Hank offered and drank it. That night, I slept in the guest room. Margaret didn't try to follow. In the morning, I began the second wave. I mailed copies of the documents to the IRS, the Department of Labor, and the local zoning commission. I filed anonymous complaints. I sent Celeste the names of Harold's shell companies and which ones had forged safety inspections. But I wasn't done with Margaret. She still had her image. Her little bridge club. Her church friends. Her curated life. I tore it down the same way Harold's fell, truth, slowly and relentlessly. I sent copies of the hotel footage to our church's leadership board. I didn't edit it. I didn't add context. I just let the images speak. 2 days later, she stopped getting calls. The bridge group disbanded. She wasn't invited to Sunday brunch. Our daughter, Emily, called me in tears. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom won't talk to me. I told her everything. Slowly. Plainly. Fact after fact. I didn't try to sway her. I let the truth do the damage. There was silence on the other end. She cheated, for 2 years? Yes. While you were in the hospital? Yes. Emily cried. Real, gut-deep sobs. Then she hung up. I sat in the kitchen afterward. Staring at the same table where we'd once had birthday dinners and Thanksgiving toasts. The silence felt like a person. Margaret tried to speak to me that night. She stood in the doorway like a child caught stealing. They stopped talking to me, she whispered. Everyone. I nodded. That's what happens when masks come off. I never wanted to hurt anyone. You wanted what you wanted. And you thought the cost would be someone else's problem. Tears again. always tears. I loved you. No, I said. You loved being loved. That's not the same thing. She reached for the chair across from me. I raised a hand. No more seats at this table. She left. The next week, I received notice from the city council. Harold's contracts with the local government were under review. One was suspended pending investigation. Another was terminated entirely. And then came the letter from the district attorney's office. They were opening a case. Fraud, embezzlement, possible perjury. The dominoes were falling. One by one. I didn't watch the news. Didn't read the papers. People sent me updates, but I never replied. I didn't need to see the wreckage. I had built it. I knew what it looked like. What surprised me, though, was how quiet it all became. No more phone calls. No more pleading. No threats. Just silence. Like a house after a fire. Burnt walls. Broken windows. But still standing. For now. Margaret stopped sleeping in our bed the day after the church board dismissed her from the Women's Council. She wandered the house like a ghost, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, organizing drawers already in order. She was trying to stay busy, to stay visible, hoping I'd acknowledge her. I didn't. She started cooking again. Pies, stews, things I hadn't eaten in years. I didn't touch them. One morning she placed a fresh apple pie on the counter and said, "Your favorite." From scratch. Just like the first time. I didn't look up from my newspaper. "You remember that day, don't you?" she asked. I turned a page. "I remember everything." She hesitated. "David, I miss you." "No," I said. "You miss the man who forgave. He's gone." She didn't try again that day. The truth was, I didn't hate her. That would have made things easier. I hated the weakness that had once made me protect her. The softness that convinced me to trust her with my name, my future, my family. That softness was dead now. I spent the next week meeting with my estate lawyer. The old will was nullified. Everything now went into a new structure. Emily would be the sole beneficiary. Margaret would receive nothing. Not a penny. Not the house. Not the savings. Not the retirement fund. I left a small trust, enough for food and rent, under one condition, that she never contact me or Emily again. My lawyer raised an eyebrow. "She's your wife." "She was," I said. I signed the papers. The next day, Margaret confronted me. She waited by the door, coat on, purse in hand. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Lawyer." "For what?" "Protection." She looked genuinely confused. "From me?" "No," I said. "From my past mistakes." She stepped closer. "David, this has gone far enough. I know I hurt you, but we were married for 50 years. That has to mean something." "It does," I said. "It means you had 5 decades to choose loyalty. You chose betrayal. I made a mistake." "No. You made a series of decisions. Calculated. Repeated. Protected by lies." Her hands trembled. "You throwing everything away?" "No," I said. "You did that when you unbuttoned your blouse for Harold Simmons while I was lying in a hospital bed." She flinched. "Stop punishing me," she whispered. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm freeing you. From the illusion. From the comfort. From the fantasy that everything was fine." She stood there for a long time. Silent. Then she spoke again, voice softer now. David, we have history. We have grandchildren. We have memories. Memories don't outweigh truth. I loved you. You loved convenience. She didn't follow me to the door this time. That night, Emily came to visit. First time in weeks. She didn't hug her mother. She barely looked at her. We sat outside on the porch, drinking coffee like we used to when she was a teenager sneaking out of prom early. She looked at me. Dad, how are you holding up? I've been better, I said. She nodded. Mom called me 3 times this week. I didn't answer. You don't have to pick sides. I already did, she said. She picked hers first. Silence passed between us. Then she pulled something from her bag, an old photo. Me and Margaret, in front of our first house. Young. Smiling. Covered in paint. I remember this, Emily said. You told me you built that porch with your bare hands. I did. I thought love like that lasted. I looked at the picture. So did I. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. I hadn't cried through any of this. Not once. But for a moment, my throat tightened. Not for Margaret. For the time. For what we lost. The next day, Margaret came into the room with a letter in her hand. My sister offered me a place to stay. In Arizona. I didn't respond. I'll leave by Friday. I nodded. She turned to go, but then paused. Will you ever forgive me? I looked at her. For the first time in weeks, really looked. Her face was tired. Her hands thinner. She wasn't the same woman from the wedding photo, from the hospital, from the porch we built. She was a stranger now, wearing a costume made of old love. No, I said. But I won't hate you either. She closed her eyes. Nodded once. Then left the room. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't grief I felt. It was peace. The day Margaret left, it rained. Not a storm. Just steady, quiet rain. The kind that drips from the gutters and soaks into the earth without a fuss. Fitting. No goodbyes. No final scenes. Just a woman with a suitcase, a taxi idling by the curb, and a door that closed one last time. I didn't watch her leave. I stayed in the workshop, sanding a piece of walnut. I wasn't building anything in particular. Just smoothing the edges of something broken. She didn't leave a note. I didn't expect one. She left the house key on the kitchen table. That was all. By noon, the rain had stopped, and the silence in the house was thicker than ever. I spent the next few days putting the final pieces in motion. Celeste sent me a message, a simple update, he's alone. Completely isolated. Lawyers dropped him. Partners turned. No one's returning his calls. Good. I had sent every shred of information to a journalist on the East Coast who specialized in white-collar crime. The kind of guy who didn't care about personal drama, only numbers, names, and violations. He called me after 2 days of digging. This guy's cooked, he said. There's enough here for multiple indictments. Wire fraud, money laundering, shell corporations. How long have you been collecting this? 2 years, I said. There was a pause. You planned all this? No. But once I saw what they were doing, I didn't look away. He laughed, low and sharp. They picked the wrong man to betray. That night, I walked through the house, turning off lights room by room. There was peace in that ritual. A finality. I paused in the hallway outside the guest room, Margaret's temporary exile before she left. The door was open. Inside, the bed was made. A single framed photo still sat on the nightstand, one of her and Emily from a trip years ago. I picked it up. Looked at the smiles. Real, untainted by what would come later. Then I turned the frame down and left the room dark. A week passed. I got a call from Harold's former partner, a man named Rothman. Greedy, slick, always talking about leveraging market momentum. He'd once called me old money without modern sense. Now, his voice was tight, desperate. "David, I heard you've been involved in some recent developments with Harold." I said nothing. "He's been calling everyone. We are hemorrhaging investors. He says you're behind it. Is it true?" I took a breath. Slow. Even. I didn't lie. I didn't cheat. I didn't steal. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I told the truth. If that's enough to ruin him, that's not my fault." He sputtered something about lawsuits, damage, liability. I let him go on. Then I said, "You knew what he was. You just didn't care until it hurt your wallet." Click. I blocked the number. I wasn't interested in sparing anyone. Not anymore. That weekend, Emily returned with her kids. First time they'd been in the house since everything started. The twins ran through the living room, laughing. The youngest curled up on the couch with a book. Emily brought in a tray of lemonade. She didn't say much. But her eyes were clearer. The hesitation, the confusion, it was gone. We sat outside after the kids went to sleep. "Mom called again," she said. I waited. I told her not to come back. "Not now. Maybe not ever." I didn't answer. She asked if you'd ever talk to her again. Still, I said nothing. Emily sighed. "You were always the quiet one. Mom used to say your silence was the loudest thing in the room." She was right. She said she doesn't recognize you anymore. She never did. Emily looked at me then. Long and searching. "You okay, Dad?" "I'm still standing." She nodded. "That's more than most." The next morning, I stood on the porch, cup of black coffee in hand, and watched the sunrise for the first time in a long time. No alarm. No footsteps behind me. No clatter of dishes or forced conversation. Just stillness. Just breath. Harold's empire was in ruins. Margaret was gone. The house was mine again, not the structure, but the space. The soul of it. It no longer smelled like her perfume. It no longer echoed with lies. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. It wasn't victory. It was clarity. I didn't go looking for Harold's friends. They found me. First, it was a board member from one of his shell companies. Then, a nervous lawyer who wanted to clarify some things about a transfer from a Cayman account. They came like rats off a sinking ship, trying to offer bits of intel in exchange for silence. I didn't threaten them. I just listened. Then I forwarded their messages to the federal investigator who'd contacted me a few days earlier. Agent Malay. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She had the kind of voice that didn't need to raise volume to command a room. "We are building a case," she said. "Your information has been invaluable." "I'm not in this for a medal," I told her. "I know," she said. "But you might end up with one anyway." I shook my head. "Keep it." That same afternoon, I got a letter from a local charity. Margaret used to chair their annual fundraiser. Apparently, she tried to reinstate herself after stepping down. The board rejected her unanimously. The letter was addressed to me. Mr. Clark, we thank you for your long-standing support. While we regret the circumstances, we appreciate your continued integrity. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like another door finally closed. That night, I visited the cemetery. Not for Margaret. For my brother. It had been years. I brought a bottle of rye and a fold-out chair. The stone was weathered, but the name was still sharp. Michael Clark. 1950 to 1981. Killed in a factory explosion. I was overseas when it happened. He died before I could say goodbye. I used to envy you, I said aloud. You never got to be disappointed by the people you loved. I poured a splash of rye onto the grass. Sat there for a while. Sometimes grief doesn't come in screams. It arrives like fog. Quiet. Cold. Slowly filling every room. Before I left, I took a picture of the grave. I hadn't done that before. This time, it felt right. Back home, I got a knock on the door. Unexpected. It was close to midnight. I opened it and saw a woman, maybe late 50s, silver hair pulled back, a notebook in her hand. Mr. Clark? Yes. My name is Ellen. I run the bookstore down on Pine. We've seen each other once or twice, I think. I nodded. I remembered her. Quiet. Smart eyes. I read about everything, she said. Not just the news, the whole story. I'm not interested in interviews. I'm not a journalist. She paused, then added, I lost my husband 2 years ago. Cancer. He left me with debt, betrayal, and a lot of silence. I didn't say anything. She handed me the notebook. Inside was a single note, as some people still believe in justice. I looked at her again. No pity in her eyes. Just recognition. I thought maybe you could use a new book, she said. Or at least someone who understands quiet. She turned to go. I didn't stop her. But I didn't close the door right away either. The next morning, Harold went on television. A live interview, his first since the scandal. I didn't plan to watch it, but the news was on at the diner, and the whole room went silent when his face appeared. He looked awful. Gaunt. Gray. His voice shaky. I've made mistakes, he said. But I'm not the villain people are painting me to be. I've served my country. I've built businesses. I've helped communities. One of the regulars at the counter muttered, lying bastard. Another added, about time someone took him down. Harold tried to cry near the end. The host didn't buy it. Neither did I. I paid for my coffee and walked out before it ended. On the way home, I stopped by the bookstore. Ellen wasn't behind the counter, but there was a new stack of hardcovers by the door. One of them caught my eye, Old War Memoirs, same unit I served with. I picked it up, thumbed through the pages. The stories were brutal. Real. Honest. I bought it. And left a note at the register, thanks. For remembering what matters. The envelope was handwritten. No return address, no stamp. Just my name, in shaky, uneven script. It was waiting on my porch one morning, tucked under the mat like something someone was ashamed to leave in the open. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. The ink bled at the edges. It smelled like old sweat and cheap cologne. David, it began. You win. I didn't sit down. I stood in the hallway and read it by the morning light. I've lost everything. My wife is gone. My company is gone. My reputation, gone. They froze my accounts. My lawyer won't take my calls. Reporters wait outside my apartment. I haven't slept in 3 days. There were no apologies. Just fear. I don't understand how it got this far. We were friends. We fought together. You saved me. Doesn't that mean anything now? I folded the letter once. Twice. Slid it into the trash. It meant nothing now. Later that day, I got a call from Agent Malley. It's done, she said. Federal charges filed. 6 counts, across 3 jurisdictions. He'll likely take a deal, but it won't save him from prison. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And David, she added, your cooperation was critical. If you ever need anything. I won't. I hung up. Outside, the sky was clear. The air crisp. Autumn had finally arrived. The tree in our backyard, that old maple we planted together, was turning red. Its leaves scattered like forgotten promises across the lawn. I raked them slowly. Methodically. The rhythm calmed me. Margaret hadn't contacted me again. She didn't try. I imagined her somewhere dry and empty, Arizona, maybe, staring out a window, wondering when it all went wrong. But I didn't dwell on it. That part of the story was over. That night, I returned to the bookstore. Ellen was behind the counter this time, stacking books. She looked up when I walked in. No surprise in her eyes. Just acknowledgement. I've got something for you, she said. She reached beneath the counter and handed me a wrapped package, cloth, not paper. Inside was an old edition of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. It belonged to my husband, she said. He didn't understand it. I think you might. I turned the book over in my hands. The pages smelled like cedar and smoke. You don't owe me anything, I said. I'm not giving it to you out of debt, she replied. Just instinct. We stood there for a moment. No one else in the store. No pressure. Then she asked, do you believe in starting over? I believe in starting again. Not sure it's the same thing. She smiled slightly. Fair enough. I bought a coffee and sat near the window, reading. For the first time in what felt like years, I read for the sake of it, not to escape, not to plan, just to be present. She didn't hover. She just worked. And I watched the light shift across the hardwood floors, soft and golden. When I left, she didn't say goodbye. She just nodded. At home, I unpacked a box from the attic. Inside were things I hadn't touched in decades, my old uniform, folded neat. Letters from my daughter when she was in college. A broken watch Margaret once gave me, never repaired. I laid them out on the dining table, one by one. Like artifacts from a lost life. I stared at them for a long time. Then I packed them away again. This time for good. The next day, I called my lawyer. I want to update the will again, I said. Anything specific? Yes. I want to add a clause. In the event of my death, no obituary. No funeral. Just cremation. Quiet. He didn't argue. When we hung up, I sat on the porch and watched the street. Nothing happened. And that was the point. Harold Simmons was a ruined man. Margaret was a ghost. And I, for the first time in 50 years, was no longer anyone's husband, friend, rescuer, fool. I was just me. And that was finally enough. It had been exactly 1 year since the night I placed that USB on the table and watched Margaret's world collapse. 12 months. 365 days. 52 weeks of silence, rebuilding, remembering, forgetting, and moving forward. I hadn't seen her. I hadn't spoken her name out loud. Not even once. She had vanished from my life the same way a bad dream does when morning breaks, a lingering shadow, but no substance. I didn't count the days out of grief. I counted them like a prisoner marks a wall. Not to mourn the sentence, but to measure the distance from who I used to be. The house looked different now. Cleaner. Simpler. The walls were repainted, the rooms rearranged. I'd sold the old dining table. Burned the bedsheets. Removed every photo that had her in it. Even the yard felt lighter. That old maple stood taller, prouder. Like it too had let go of something it didn't need. I spent most days in the workshop now. Making small things. Boxes. Picture frames. Once, I even built a birdhouse. Nothing dramatic. Just acts of quiet construction, piece by piece, like stitching myself back together without thread. Ellen stopped by every other week. Sometimes with a book. Sometimes just with silence. We didn't become lovers. This wasn't that kind of story. But there was understanding. And that was enough. One morning, she brought me a photograph. Black and white. Slightly faded. A soldier. Dirty. Leaning against a tank. The name stitched above the pocket said Clark. I stared at it for a long time. "Where did you find this?" I asked. My husband collected old war photos. I was going through them, and there you were. I ran my fingers along the edge of the photo. "I remember that day," I said. We'd just gotten out of a 2-day fight. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. But we were alive. She smiled gently. "You still are." I nodded. Then placed the photo on the shelf in my study. The only one I displayed. That afternoon, I drove out to the edge of town. There was a small hill behind the park where I used to take Emily as a child. We'd roll down the grass, laughing until we couldn't breathe. I brought a box with me. Inside were the last remnants, a wedding ring, a dried flower from our anniversary bouquet, the letter Margaret had written me on our 25th year. I'd kept it all. Not out of sentiment. But out of respect for the man I once was. I dug a hole beneath the largest oak tree. Deep enough that no animal would find it. I placed the box inside, covered it with dirt, and stood there for a moment. No speeches. No ceremony. Just goodbye. On the way home, I stopped at a roadside diner. The kind with cracked vinyl seats and bad coffee. I ordered a slice of cherry pie and sat by the window. A young couple laughed 2 booths over. They looked like we once did, full of hope and unaware of what time could do to promises. I didn't envy them. But I didn't pity them either. They were just beginning. And I had ended well. Back home, I found a letter in the mail. It was from Emily. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Pen on paper. "Dad, I just wanted you to know how proud I am. You showed me what strength really looks like, not in anger or revenge, but in endurance. In silence. In walking away and staying whole. I love you." I sat in my chair and read it 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it in my wallet, and lit a fire in the fireplace. Not to burn. Just to warm the room. I made tea. Watched the flames. And for the first time in my entire life, not just the marriage, not just the betrayal, but the whole arc of being a man in this world, I felt still. Not lonely. Not broken. Just still. I didn't need more. I didn't need less. I didn't need anything. I had my name. I had my hands. And I had peace. At last.